This is the Rif on Beitza, Daf Chaf Aleph, Amid Aleph. Before we start with the Gemara, we should just start with a pasuk, which is in Shmos 12:16. In general, malacha is forbidden on Yom Tov, just the same way that it's forbidden on Shabbos. And the pasuk in Shmos 12:16 says, "V'yom harishon mikra kodesh, v'yom hashvi'i mikra kodesh yelachem, kol malacha lo yeyaseh bahem, ach asher yachel chol nefesh hu lo yeyaseh lachem." And it's talking, I believe, about Pesach. So it's saying that on the first day should be a holy convocation of mikra kodesh, and similarly on the seventh day is a mikra kodesh. So therefore, kol malacha lo yeyaseh bahem, you shouldn't do any work on them. However, it gives us an exception. Asher yachel chol nefesh, that which every man must eat, hu lo yeyaseh lachem, you can do that. So you have an exception to the general prohibition of malacha, forbidden labor. You could do it for the purpose of eating. And as we'll see, this is presumably for enjoyment of the Yom Tov, and so this exception is really restricted to Jewish people who are keeping the Yom Tov. But for people who are not, so you would have the original prohibition of malacha that applies, just like it would apply for things that are not ochel nefesh for the purpose of eating. And similarly for animals who don't have this kind of mitzvah of enjoying Yom Tov, so you similarly couldn't violate malacha, even though it means it's for the purpose of feeding them. So we have this kind of distinction here. So this is what Rav Chisda says in the beginning of Beitza 21a. Amar Rav Chisda, behema chetzi shel nachri v'chetzi shel Yisrael. You have an animal which is half owned by a Jew and half owned by a non-Jew. Muter l'shochato b'Yom Tov. It's permitted to slaughter it on Yom Tov. You would think that's because it belongs to a non-Jew, and therefore you're accomplishing something that it would be forbidden because it's a malacha, it's a prohibited act where you're not going to get this type of benefit of ochel nefesh, and it thus wouldn't fit into the general exclusion in that pasuk. However, it's permitted if it's half owned by a Jew, half owned by a non-Jew. My time. What's the reason? It's impossible to get that one olive's measure of meat without shechting it, without slaughtering it. So to get the Jew's portion, you need to slaughter the entire animal, and so it's part of that general exclusion that you can do it for ochel nefesh. Aval isa chetzi shel nachri v'chetzi shel Yisrael. If dough is jointly owned by a Jew and a non-Jew, asur lafato v'Yom Tov. It's forbidden to bake it on Yom Tov. My time. During kneading, it's possible to divide it, so you can't bake the entire loaf. The exclusion within that pasuk was restricted just to that which is ochel nefesh for somebody who has this obligation of simchas Yom Tov. Bo minei may Rav. They inquired of Rav. Now this is a little bit. So something interesting to note is that our Gemara has a different statement. Instead of saying Bo minei may Rav, it says Bo minei may Rav Huna, and it's very likely that the reason for this divergence in Girsos is that the next word is Hane. Hane b'nei Baga, these villagers. So the word Hane looks very similar to Huna, so either the Rif's Girsa is correct or our Gemara, our printed edition, is correct, but you can see how a word would either be added or taken away. So according to Rif Yomi Beitza, Rav, they inquired of Rav, Hane b'nei Baga, Ramo alai kimcha devnei cheba. These villagers upon whom the government has imposed the baking of flour for the soldiers. And these were non-Jewish soldiers, and there was an obligation that when they went from one town to another, so they would have to provide the flour, the baking of the flour for these soldiers. So Ma'u lifinhu b'Yom Tov. May the villagers bake it on Yom Tov. because remember they're now baking it also on behalf of non-Jews, which would be fine during the week, but during Yom Tov you have a general Isser Malacha with an exclusion only of Ochel Nefesh for a Jewish person who has this chiyuv of celebrating Yom Tov. So Amar Lahu, he, namely Rav, said to them, Chazinan ika kai yehive rifta lianoka. We shall see what happens if they give a loaf of bread to an infant, to a child. So lo kapte nachrim alei. So if the non-Jews don't object to this, to giving it to a child, so you're allowed to give it. So then kol rifta chazil Yisrael. And then every single loaf we could say is fit for the purpose of baking for and giving to a Jew, namely for a Jewish child. Our Gemara actually says a child, Lianoka instead of Yisrael. So therefore, b'shari, it would be permitted to bake them. V'ikakte, but if they're makbid, then asur, it's forbidden, because then the only cooking would be cooking for these non-Jews, and then you wouldn't have this exclusion to the general prohibition of malacha, of forbidden labor on Yom Tov. And now we conclude here. Rav. We don't actually paskin like Rav here, or in our Gemara like Rav Huna. Ela bein kach ubein kach asur. Regardless, it's forbidden. Dam Rav Yeshua ben Levi. For Rav Yeshua ben Levi said, "Mezamnin es hakusi b'Shabbos." We can invite a non-Jew on Shabbos to come to our meals and eat. The aim is also Yom Tov, but we can't invite him on Yom Tov. As Gzeira Shema Yarba B'Shvilo, lest we increase on his behalf. We'll increase the cooking, we'll increase the baking, and as a result, this cooking will be done for him, and so it would be a prohibition. It would be a violation of the prohibition of malacha without the exclusion of Ochel Nefesh. So we make this Gzeira lest we end up increasing the malacha on his behalf. V'amrei. Adibri Rava l'Mar Shmuel. Rava directed Mar Shmuel, the Darash, and he expounded, Mizamnin esakusi b'Shabbos, ve'im mizamnin esakusi b'Yom Tov, Shema Yarba b'Shvilo, the same thing that we just said in the name of Yeshua ben Levi. And Mirei Mar Zutra ki ave mikli like l'hukusi, when a non-Jew visited Mirei Mar Zutra b'Yom Tov, and he visited them on Yom Tov, Amrilei, they said to him, if it's enough for you, if it's okay for you, that which we've already expended our efforts to create, so mutav, then all is fine and good. But if not, and you should know that we're not going to expend any extra effort on your behalf. And this wasn't in order to be not nice to him. It's just because this prohibition of malacha was only has the exception of Ochel Nefesh for somebody who has this keeping of Yom Tov. So this way they kind of were able to avoid the problem that caused the Gzeira over there. So we see from all of this that we don't paskin like Rav, that they could have baked for the soldiers. Okay, it continues. Itmar, it was stated, and this means it was stated by Amoraim. Ha'ofim Yom Tov l'chal. So let's say you actually baked from Yom Tov to to a weekday. So you're not supposed to do that. But the question is, what happens as a result of that? Rav Chisda Amar Loka, Rav Amar Ein Loka. So Rav Chisda says that he gets lashed and punishment for this as a penalty, and Rav says he's not. So Rav Chisda Amar Loka Lo Amrinan Hoel V'imikla Orchim Chazilahu Hashtanami Chazilahu. Rav Chisda says that he gets lashes because we don't say that if visitors had come to him, so then it would have been fit for them on Yom Tov. So too, it would be fit for them. So it's not such a big violation of the malacha on Yom Tov. So you can consider it to be Ochel Nefesh, and as a result, you would say he's not lashed. Rav Chisda doesn't say that however, so he says he is lashed. Rabba Amar Rabbi says that he's not lashed. Amrinan Hoel, we do say this whole since statement. V'hilchasa Rabba, and we actually paskin like Rabba that he's not lashed, and we do say this Hallel. Birarnuhu Beperak Elu over in Psachim, and we already elucidated this in over there in Psachim. Continuing, Tanya, they went in a brisa, and now we're citing again from this pasuk in Shmos 12:16 that I talked about in the beginning, which the pasuk says, "V'yom harishon mikra kodesh u'v'yom hashi mikra kodesh yelachem kol mulacha lo yaseh v'hem ach asher yachel l'chol nefesh hu levado yaseh v'chem." And they only cite this end of this pasuk, ach asher yachel l'chol nefesh hu levado yaseh v'chem. This exclusion that for ochel nefesh, for the purpose of eating, you can do this malacha, in English, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done by you. And it says kol nefesh. So we say from this, shomea ani afilu nefesh behema. If it's kol nefesh, then it's any nefesh whatsoever, any soul. So this includes even the nefesh of an animal. So if you need to feed an animal, you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. Is b'mashma. Kinyan shenemar, just like we have in a pasuk in Vayikra 24:18, it says, "Makei nefesh behema yishal mena, nefesh tachas nefesh." And he that smites a beast mortally shall make it good, life for life, which means that you pay the mammon for it, and you have to give another animal in its place. So you see that the word nefesh is applied also for to an animal. So therefore, also animals are implied. So you would say that. So Talmud Omer lachem. However, the pasuk says lachem. Again, the pasuk says ach asher yachel l'chol nefesh hu levado yaseh lachem. That only may be done by you, but lachem could also be said instead of being by you, it means for you. So it's for you to the exclusion of something else. So that would seem to exclude something. It is not for every soul. So they derive from there lachem v'lo l'kusim, lachem v'lo l'klatim. For you and not for non-Jewish people, and for you and not for your pets, your dogs. Not to equate the two, chas v'shalom, but what we're talking about is these people and these animals are not obligated in celebrating Yom Tov, so they're not part of the general this general exclusion to the Isur Malacha. So Divrei Rabbi Yossi Haglili. This was the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Haglili, that only that which can be eaten by Jews who are celebrating Yom Tov. Rabbi Akiva Omer, afilu nefesh behema b'mashma. Nefesh does actually include these animals, and so for your pets, for your animals, you're allowed to do it. Imkein matal nebom lachem. So what is the exclusion of lachem? So lachem for you, your people, in other words, you people who are celebrating Yom Tov, v'lo l'kusim, and not for non-Jews who aren't doing that. But on the other hand, now you're going to ask, that's not nice to include your pet dog and to exclude Gentiles, who after all are human. So let me marba. So the answer is marba niyasaklavim shemizona son alecha. These a dog which belongs to you, you really have an obligation to feed him. To feed it, because you need to feed your animals. So it's really part of the lachem. It's part of your own things that you would need to do in terms of feeding. And we'll exclude non-Jews who you don't have this obligation, this typical requirement that every day you would need to feed it. Now, how do we rule? Do we rule in accordance with Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Yossi Haglili? So the Rif says, "V'hilchos like Rabbi Yossi Haglili," that we paskin like him, that we exclude everybody. The Sasam Tana Kavaseh, because the Tana in a Mishnah says plainly, straightforwardly, exactly like him. Snan, because we learn in the Mishnah. Isa saklavim. If you make this dough for dogs. Which you might feed to the dogs, but bisman sheram ochlin mimena, when the shepherds eat from these loaves. So then chayevis b'chala, even though it's really animal food, but since the shepherds also eat it, then it's considered human food. So so it's obligated in this taking off this portion of challah. It's the matnas kahuna. V'nefes b'yom tov, and it can be baked on Yom Tov. And then it continues. So you see that according to this, it's only if the shepherds would eat from it that it can be baked on Yom Tov, which implies that if it's not eaten by a human, then it could not be baked on Yom Tov. It doesn't say it explicitly, but it's implicit here, and that's how he derives that we pass on like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. If you have a dispute in a brisa like we just had, and you have a stam mishnah, halacha kastam masnisin. We paskin like that stam mishnah. So we paskin like Rabbi Yossi Aglili.